Hi, everyone. I'm Gwen Callahan, the co-director of the HPLFF Film Festival, and I am joined for the Q&A for Shorts Block 3. I'm joined by Avery Abigail of The Patron, and from Keepers, we have Eric, Chris, and Paul, the cinematographer, writer, producer, and actor. Did I get that all correct? Sorry, I was like on the fly. Okay, excellent. How are you guys doing?
We are excellent. I directed, Eric shot and wrote, and Chris produced.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. Sorry. Brian's normally here to push all the buttons and I had to do everything. So it was a little bit of a mind scramble for me, but I'm okay now. It was great having your films in our program. Both of them very Lovecraftian, very cosmic horror. My first question for each of you is, are you a Lovecraft fan? And when did you come to the cosmic horror genre? Go ahead, Avery. I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think I was a fan of Lovecraft before realizing that it was Lovecraftian. And let me know, I'm on set right now, so let me know if I need to move to a different spot. But the cosmic horror was something that I had always enjoyed, but I didn't really deep dive into Lovecraft's canon specifically until when I first came across the script for The Patron. And it's been delightful reading all of his stories and watching other films that have been made that are homages or adaptations of Lovecraft's work. So always a fan of cosmic horror, didn't necessarily know that it was Lovecraft until semi recently.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say I was kind of in a similar boat, although, I read Call of Cthulhu like way back in the day and loved it, but I'm very much a fan of just like all nautical folklore. And love like the Guillermo del Toro's films, which are sort of like adjacent, I think, to Lovecraftian works. And so for Keepers particularly, I wouldn't say was fully like intended to be like we're gonna make a Lovecraft film, but I think as we started filming it and as we're talking about what does lie beneath, then it sort of really started to make sense, and especially when we're talking about trying to expand this to a feature, that's where the Lovecraft universe is definitely coming way more into play, to try to expand on sort of you know all of the things that lie beneath and sort of like the indifference of the universe and like the old ones versus just man. And yeah, and I feel like a lot of the Lovecraft stuff I've been reading up on lately, it's all about those like small town and like a fish out of water character who's like being confronted with like sort of craziness, and that's definitely something we want to explore further with our main character as we expand the story.
Nice. How about Chris and Paul?
I spoke a little bit about this at the festival last month. But like Eric said, when we made this short, it was not really at the forefront of our minds that it was a Lovecraft story. But as we started to approach a larger world, it became pretty obvious to us that this would be a really good direction to go towards. But like Eric, it's something that's kind of new to me, and it's been fun getting into the Lovecraft world.
Yeah, I think what inspires me the most and gets me, like, what I like to watch is a world where it's real and grounded. And so when things start to get weird, you believe it and it feels extra special, like it's possible that it could happen in our world. So I really like what happens right on that razor edge of real and fantasy, and I feel like the Lovecraft world exists there as well. So that's what we set out to explore.
Nice. It is kind of an overlay on like what we like normal people, people who haven't been exposed to seeing everything through the lens of cosmic horror and Lovecraft. It's kind of an overlay on that, and it really, I think you're absolutely right that it gives an extra layer of meaning when you have that on top of it. So with your film Keepers, we have the character who is obsessed with finding the truth, as we do in so many Lovecraft films. And so much so that he puts himself in a very dangerous situation. And it really, like the interchange of like the fish and the lobster and the offerings in exchange for the gold bars is really evocative of like the shadow over Innsmouth. And I'm wondering if that's something that you had in mind when you were creating the script and making the movie.
You know, it wasn't really, but I think, you know, I think the idea for me, I think the first thing I thought about when I was thinking of how to write something that takes place in Cape Cod was the idea of, you know, the lobster fishing industry, and you know, it's basically like the trick of what if the thing that you pull up is, you know, is changing and different and isn't lobster. Like what if you're getting back something strange and you're starting to communicate with something down there, and then kind of like the idea of just like you know, the fisherman is the one being fished for, actually, like who's hunting who, kind of thing, who's luring who into what kind of a trap. So yeah, that wasn't there for me, but I also feel like just have a lot of background reading like older nautical folk tales, and I feel like they're always like simple. They have a little bit of like a moral sort of tale to them, or like if you don't do this because then this will happen. But they're always kind of like simple, but also there is that magical realism or fantasy element to them that are sort of based in, you know, what real people experience on the sea, and then they have to rationalize crazy things with like stories. So anyways, long-winded, but yeah, that's kind of how the story came about, I guess.
Good. Avery, so am I correct that you didn't write the script, but you directed it for the
I
picture?
didn't write the original script. I did do about a year of rewrites on it, but the original story was written by someone who's a longtime Cthulhu fan and a longtime goer to this festival specifically. So I did sort of take his concept and we just punched it up, make it a little more cinematic, but we stayed really true to his original premise and to sort of the cosmic core elements he originally had. We retained. So I did actually do a bit of writing on it, but the story was not mine originally.
Okay,
I did direct it. So
with the patron, filmed locally here in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, filmed in the Portland Metro. We filmed it at the Newburgh Public Library, so you know, out in Yamhill County, so not too far from Portland.
Okay. How did you convince the library to let you film there?
It's really easy if the guy who wrote the script is the former library director and the current city manager of the library and wants it to happen. So that was absolutely delightful. And again, the biggest champion of this story, the person who it came from, was the one who kind of had the keys to the city, as it were. So it was much easier than it normally is to secure a location. So
okay.
if you're
wow, amazing. Yeah. That's incredible. There's a lot of talk of during the festival and like on our Q&As that as an independent filmmaker, it's really key that you kind of write for the location you know you can get. So that happened. That must have just been a happy coincidence of who was writing the story and then who was involved in the production. That's incredible. So for the production itself, then the production design, and I mean, obviously it's a library, we didn't have to dress it up too much. But for the scene where Howard is like doing the ritual and like summoning, trying to do the chant, and it ends up with all of the undersea kind of decorations and things. What was that process like?
We dubbed that on set. We dubbed that Fish Hell, and our creation of Fish Hell was a lot of fun. We had 4 or 5 set designers who came in. We brought in actual things out from the coast. One of our team went out to the coast and was just picking up seaweed and brought actual sand from out there, so that there was an element of that. We had created some prop like eggs that were glowing. You don't see them a ton in that final shot, but there's a bunch of them all over. We even had, to get that water reflection, we had cooking trays with water in it that someone was just holding on a C-stand up above the bookshelves and just slightly shaking it to catch the light. So it was 100%, well, 99.999% practical effects to transform it, and it looked and smelled like the ocean until we cleaned it all up.
Oh my gosh. Well, I would absolutely visit that haunted house. And if you don't have plans to do something like that for Halloween, I think you should.
I might have to pitch that to the library. That's a great idea. They might go for it.
So for the book and the ritual and everything, was that kind of taken from the story? Like, how did you come up with the actual words that were used?
When Jeff is summoning the creature, that's what's actually interesting about that is the lines in the script went one way, and when we got to set that day, we shot our entire picture in 2 days, which was a whirlwind. But we kind of played. We had a couple things we needed to hit right. We needed the Howard's blood to be spilled, but then also Jeff's blood to be spilled, because they both end up in fish hell, and for Howard to, it had to happen for Howard in a way where he's being a kindly librarian intervening, where it's inadvertent on his part. So we ended up, a lot of that dialogue was actually improvised on the day, as we changed up some of the blocking of just how Howard gets stabbed. So honestly, props to my actors. Neil Green, who played Jeff, did a lot of research, did his own deep dive into Cthulhu stuff, and had a lot that he was working with, that he had just come up with on his own. So when it came time, he was already there. He was already halfway to being a cultist, I guess.
Halfway. It sounds like he was all in, a method actor.
His audition tape, he went all in on it. I hope we can share it someday. But no, he was so dedicated to the role and just had a lot of fun playing this absolutely, just off the rails kind of guy who turned out to be right, but still crazy.
Nice. I'm gonna hop back to the Keepers crew and ask you about how you filmed all those scenes, like basically on a boat and in the water, and then also under the water.
You want to start?
Yeah, sure. So we had a certain amount of time. I think we had 3 days, right? And we knew we didn't have a lot of time for lighting. So we were like, all right, we're going to shoot sunrise. During the middle of the day, we're going to shoot scenes where we don't need to be as controlled. And then at the end of we'd shoot sunset. So we'd get those slots. So we'd shoot on the boat in the morning and at night. And during the middle of the day, when the sun was at the highest, is when we shot our underwater scenes, because we had the sun above, so you get the most water through the top of the surface of the water. And we shot those with an underwater rig. It was definitely challenging. We had to switch locations at one point because one lake was too murky. We chose the lake just because the ocean was too murky, too unpredictable. It was September, so it was cold. So the lake was the best option for that.
So everything that you see that's above water was off the coast of Cape Cod on the lobster boat. We only had budget for the one boat. So anytime you see a shot of the boat, that's me and my co-DP in wetsuits with a gimbal. Marcus would be holding the gimbal sitting on a flat top kayak, and I would have my arms around him and be paddling him and stabilizing him. So super fun, sketchy stuff. And we had an amazing Captain Mike of Sport Fishing Cape Cod, who, I mean, the first day we went out, it was super rough. Everyone was seasick, and you can kind of see some of those scenes towards the middle of the film. But he was so knowledgeable about the area, and once we kind of got into a routine with him, and he started to understand what we needed, he would take us these really cool inlets where we were protected from the wind, and he even got to the point where, like, on the last night, like the final shot of the film, he basically beached his boat for us, so that it was shallow enough where our actor felt safe doing the stunt, because that's really Luke in the crate going over the edge in the wide shot. You know, and so yeah, there was a lot of commitment on everyone's part, and it was super fun. We just did free diving for all the underwater stuff, so no scuba gear, so it's just all holding our breaths, and but I think it was fulfilling. It was quite the adventure, and I think that's part of how we achieve some of the cinematic stuff that you just don't see very often, because it's like hard to do and and people aren't willing to really necessarily go out there and get the real stuff. And so I think that is part of what makes our film unique, for sure.
It looked fantastic. Like, you accomplished like what feels like the impossible. Yeah, kudos.
Yeah, and then and from a practical standpoint, we used a Sony A1 small mirrorless camera, but great sensor. We used manual anamorphic lenses, but we used a DJI LiDAR autofocus system that basically did the job of pulling focus for us. So that's the other thing, is we needed to be really mobile and not have a big camera package, because we only had the one boat. And so anytime you see an angle of the boat, everyone on the team is behind the camera, right? So it's like we only had 4 feet of wiggle room like every
Oh
time.
my,
Oh yeah, it all came together well, but it was definitely technically challenging
oh
to
my
play.
gosh. How many days did you shoot?
I think we did 3 days on the boat, and then there was a half day extra underwater, or is it just 3 days? Okay, so yeah, it was three
Because it was a rain day.
Yeah.
3 days. And again, it was like shoot in the morning on the boat, go to the lake, do the underwater stuff, shoot in the afternoon on the boat, and do it all again. But make sure you're out on the wall. Like, our days would start at like 4:15 a.m. so that when the sun, like that first shot of the film, when the sun is hitting the horizon, Marcus and I had to be ready in the water for when that sun started to hit. So, just yeah, it was fun.
So any webbed fingers?
Yeah,
Anyone come?
there were large sharks on the shark tracker during that time.
There's a moment that I always like to bring up, because I was not in the water. When Eric and his co-DP were in the water for that final shot that he was talking about, where Captain Mike got the boat pretty shallow. We saw a fin that very much looked like a shark and startled the bejesus out of all of us, and we were in the boat, or they were in the boat, within seconds. But Captain Mike was just laughing his butt off. He knew that it was a sunfish right away, and if you've ever seen the sunfish, they're pretty terrifying animals that swim like vertical and have giant dorsal fins. But anyways,
There was a shark though. We were tracking a great white shark, and its name was Jefferson, and it was 16 feet long. And they tagged them all that are in that area, so we were just making sure to get too close.
Oh my gosh. That all sounds terrifying. The things people do for your art. You guys literally risked your lives to make this film. So thank you for that.
thank you.
I'm always curious, when people are shooting in a confined area like that, like, how do you plan out like your angles and your shots when you're kind of in a situation where you're sort of limited by environment and location? So for example, you guys on the boat just went into the water, and then Avery, you're in a library, and like those stacks don't have a ton of room between them. Are there things that you had to adjust for once you got on location?
Avery, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll take that one first. We did a lot of blocking before our shoot days. So we we planned shooting it with this library in mind. So it was it was more we got to utilize the books. Like there's a couple of shots of us looking through the bookshelves to give sense of depth. It was a little bit challenging, but we had blocked it so well that it was, our world was just very small. You'll notice there's really not any shots that are particularly wide. In ours, just we're shooting pretty tight, and that's just because of the space. So we made it work, and it definitely has its own feel just because of that.
It is very like up close, like you feel like you're right there with the characters. Where did you have did you shoot when the library was closed, or were there like library patrons kind of milling around as you were
No,
shooting?
they would have been very alarmed because there was a lot of screaming on our set. But we were able to get 2 days where the library was closed consecutively. So we shot on a Sunday and a Monday when it's normally closed, and so the good employees let us in and let us scream and throw things for 12 hours and then go home.
Nice. That's amazing.
Yeah. I
How
think
about Keeper?
Yeah, we went in with an idea to have a very versatile, as Eric mentioned, very versatile camera package, knowing that we were gonna, we'd never been on the boat. I think we had one scouting day on the boat briefly where we were kind of, okay, this is what we're working with. I think Eric and his co-DP Marcus are just excellent at figuring out things on the fly. All of us come from sort of a, documentary-ish background where we're kind of figuring things out as we go. So I think a lot of that experience came in handy shooting on a boat where we weren't exactly sure what, we had a general idea of how we wanted it to look, but a lot of it came down to conversations together on the boat. Where would this look the coolest? How are we going to block this? Working with Luke, our actor, to see, okay, where is he going to be? How would he naturally move here and here? And I think all of us kind of thrive in that environment. And it keeps things fresh, and it's a little scary, but it feels more, I think, more sort of lived than if we had planned it out.
Yeah, and we definitely had a storyboard and a shot list, but the shot list was basically based on like there are certain shots that we don't want to compromise on, like the buoy shots, like the wide shots establishing of the boat and the wide shots at the end. Like I had some stuff in my head that I was like, this we're doing this no matter what, even if it's a pain in the ass on the kayaks and like all the things. But then the stuff in between, it's like we know we need to check off a tight shot, and we know we need like a wide shot, but it's like how those happen and where on the boat, like we're just stayed flexible about it. Tried to cover angles of the boat we hadn't seen in previous scenes, to keep things a little bit interesting, knowing that it was a bit of a repetitive like thing that the character was doing throughout the film. So.
Yeah. A specific thing I'd add that we kind of had to adapt on the fly. We had this idea of, and you could help me out, Eric, with the specifics here, but when we were trying to do some of the underwater shots of Luke free diving in the lake, we had this idea that the DPs would be able to follow him very easily underwater, but they were in wetsuits, and so their wetsuits were buoyant, and they couldn't actually go as deep and as far as they wanted to go. Yeah. So we had to weigh them down. We were putting the gold bar props inside their wetsuits. We were filling them with rocks. I forget how we ultimately got the shot. I think you may have adapted, but that's an example of something that we went in with an idea, and the elements were not working with us, and we kind of had to
and one of the shots that I really wish we could have gotten was like a very big wide thalassophobia shot of the character in the middle, like this big, with just the ocean, and just seeing over his shoulder. It's just like the endless abyss, right? And then maybe seeing something in the distance at the very end, but like that's something you have to compromise on. We could only go so deep. We didn't have crazy amounts of space in the lake, so when you have the kind of final underwater shot of Luke, like for safety purposes, his head is only really like 1.5 feet or 2 feet under the water because he needs to be able to come up and take a breath. And so, in the big budget version of this, obviously there's things I would have changed and things like the wish list would have accommodated, but you do your best with the budget you have and resources.
Nice. Did you mention that you are developing this particular story into a feature?
Yes. Yeah, we have a it's like a 60-page visual storyboard outline and a pitch deck, and we're working on the script. The way I actually pitched Keepers to these guys was through a series of storyboards and an outline rather than a traditional screenplay. And I think that since there is no dialogue, that actually made the most sense of how to like get buy-in. And so that's kind of the way we've written this this feature. But yeah, it dives more into like the town that he is in, and this Keepers the short actually essentially acts as like a cold open to the feature. So if you think about Keepers in the way it exists now, our concept is that like the person who disappears at the end of at the end of Keepers is actually the sibling of someone that has long since moved away, and they're coming back to this, you know, very strange, very shut off from the rest of the world, like island seaside community. And there seems to be this strange indifference with the people that are going missing, and they're trying to figure out where their sibling is and get answers. And so that's kind of, you know, from a practical standpoint, we don't have $50 million, so the whole thing can't be cool underwater stuff, right? So it's like we do need to figure out ways to build like a sense of, you know, wonder and despair and fear like on land, but we still want to stay true to the short and do a lot of stuff on boats and in marshlands and like kind of get out there.
Yeah. It does have like a very I think the absence of dialogue and how much you're shooting outside really makes it feel solitary and like lonely, and kind of like this person, you get right away that he's kind of a loner or something maybe has happened to him. And you get that sense of background conveyed just through what's happening or what's not happening in your shots. And I'm excited to hear that you're developing the feature, because I'm curious. I am curious about like the town that he comes from and like what happened to him that made him, you know, just be okay with sacrificing himself to find out, you know, what's down there. I guess.
Well, stay tuned because we're working on it.
Trying.
Yeah.
And Avery, the same with the characters in the patron, like their performances were really wonderful. How did you it sounded like you did auditions for those parts. Can you talk a little bit about how you chose those actors?
Yeah, we did do auditions. We were still in rewrites at the time that we needed to put out the casting call. So this is a bit unconventional, but I actually kind of wrote a mock-up sides that did actually come from the script we ended up with. It's not the greatest writing in the world, but it's pretty cheesed up. And I thought if someone can sell me this, they're going to be able to, you know, perform what we actually have written in the script just fine. We had a lot of people audition for both, and Neil Green, who played Jeff, was his audition was super memorable, and I felt like he towed the right line of that sort of deranged, but not overly creepy, you know, kind of a normal guy who's gone down an odd path. And Fiele Matias, who's our Howard, really played the fear well, and I knew that his reactions were really going to sell whether or not people believed in the events that happened. So they were phenomenal. It was really fun, the casting process, and then once we had them on set, I mean, the levity they brought to the opening scene was pretty much improv, just spur of the moment in our first take, and then we just kept that dialogue and just made it a little better in the subsequent take. So they brought a lot to the story, and I'm super grateful for them.
Nice. And this is a question for both of you. I'm always curious because sometimes we get filmmakers who aren't their wheelhouse is not specifically horror. So I'm curious if both of these filmmaking teams, like, are you a horror? Would you consider yourself a horror director?
I've always loved horror. I feel like it packs a huge punch in a relatively accessible way of making. So I think that combination is fun. You know, there's just a really large impact that it can have on audiences, and I've always loved that and how it affects me. And yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, but we wouldn't. I don't think we would pigeonhole our team as as like we're only wanting to do horror in our careers.
That's
sure.
right. We actually
like,
funny. We started making silent films together, and it just
Mhm.
it's interesting, sort of comedy, physical comedy type silent films, and it's interesting that this ended up being a silent film as well. So
yeah, but I think like the thing that maybe unites future projects we've been thinking about are just committing to doing things like practically and sort of going outside of our comfort zone as a team to show kind of situations that aren't as commonly seen in cinema, and I think that can often be eye opening or spooky, and so yeah, that's
How about you, Avery?
Yeah, for me, one, I wouldn't pigeonhole us to strictly horror either. I also am typically the producer of the short films, so I actually hadn't been in the director's chair since about 2016. So this is my first time back directing for a while. But we have done some horror adjacent before, and we will again. But definitely not our only genre. But we had a lot of fun, and I would direct a horror again. I think I like directing them more than watching them sometimes.
Well, personally, I think horror is the most fun, but so I'm glad to hear that there's a variety in your diets. We should probably wrap up. I'm sorry that Tobias wasn't able to join us. Tobias Nielsen, who was the lead in Tranquilizer, is in Denmark, so he's it's like 3:30 in the morning or 4 in the morning for him. So he was going to try to stay up, but it seems like he didn't make it. but that's okay. Hopefully, you guys have had a chance to watch some of the streaming festival, and for those of you watching, hopefully you're enjoying the streaming festival. There's lots more to come, lots more Q&As to join up with. And yeah, I just want to thank you, Eric, Chris, Paul, and Avery again for joining me and taking time out of your schedules to come talk to me about your films. Really appreciate it. And thanks so much for making such wonderful films.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having us, Glenn.
Thank you all for watching.
thank you for watching and having us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, Avery.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate it.